Ever thought to yourself that you need a website for your Dark Souls top lists? No? Well, this is a very specific type of ad for a very small niche audience. Go to soulspace.com/total Indeimaus today and get 10% off your first website. Create your own space at Soulspace. Only if you're making a Dark Souls top list website though. If you're not, you're gonna have to head somewhere else. Ever since the release of Hearthstone, there has been this sudden resurgence of interest in collectible and trading card games based on already established IPs. I dove pretty deep into Hearthstone on release and spent more money than I'd like to admit, although I haven't touched it for the past few months apart from doing the single player stuff, so I've fallen pretty hardcore out of the meta at this stage. Although I did hear Priest was garbage now, and I have a Golden Priest, so that may have contributed to me not playing anymore. And honestly, with the upcoming release of Gwent, I'm incredibly excited to jump back into that after spending more time in Gwent than the actual Witcher 3 storyline. Regardless, being the creative person I am, I've always enjoyed designing custom cards for Hearthstone. I don't think I've ever been very good at it, but goddamn it, I really enjoy it. More so than the actual game at this point, which sounds absurd and is probably dumb. So being a Dark Souls focused channel, I've spent the last few weeks designing a bunch of Dark Souls bosses, enemies, and NPCs as Hearthstone cards. I've been drip feeding a few of them through my Twitter as a sneak peek, but that's only a very minuscule amount of ones that I've created. I've spent way too many hours creating these custom cards for this video, but I've also got some ideas from you guys through Twitter as well, so I'll give credit where it is due. Without further ado, I've chosen 10 of the cards I've created to show you here today, and I know there's going to be an overwhelming amount of comments saying either that's overpowered or that's underpowered, so I thought I'd just let you know I'm not a Hearthstone balancer or anything. I've tried to keep it as genuine to the game as possible, and I'm sure with a few mana, damage, and health tweaks, some of these cards could be real. The main thing I wanted to achieve is to make them as genuine to their Dark Souls counterpart as possible, so just keep that in mind. So enough introduction, let's jump into some of these custom Dark Souls Hearthstone cards, and if you guys enjoy it, I'm more than happy to make a few more videos showing off some of the other cards I've designed. Leave some of your card ideas down below, and if I use them in the next video, I'll be sure to give full credit. The Dragon Slayer and Executioner from the original Dark Souls is easily one of my favorite boss fights in the game. Ornstein and Smough are known for quite a few of their unique features and mechanics, the main one being the fact that you're fighting two damn cunts at once. That is a good saying. Cunts at once. And then when one of them dies, he'll buff the other one and make him even more of a nightmare to fight. So I took that idea with their card design. The main card is Dragon Slayer Ornstein, who is a 7 mana 7/4 with the battle cry Summon Executioner Smough, so they'll always enter the battlefield together. This also means Smough can't be obtained by himself, he has to be summoned through Ornstein. Both cards have their unique death rattles as well, which will buff the other one on death, very similar to the actual boss fight. Ornstein is all about his attack and Smough is a lot more focused on higher health, and each will boost each other's stats on death. And for some reason I made them golden legendaries as well because I thought it looked cool, it suited their armor, I guess. It's the only reason they're gold. They're also a part of the Gwyn's 4 Knights in the lore, so I decided to add that as their tribe, which doesn't really mean anything outside of the lore factor right now. And the basic premise for these two cards was suggested by @DeGrenastra. I apologize if I said your name wrong, but he suggested the Ornstein Smough kind of combo, and then I took it from there and worked it into my own a little bit. So thank you for the brilliant idea, my man. The Abyss Watchers are one of the Lords of Cinder from Dark Souls 3, and honestly, one of my favorite fights in the game. Their gimmick is strength in numbers. When an Abyss Watcher dies, another will arise, and so on and so forth. So I thought I'd take that idea and make the Abyss Watchers a 6 mana 3/4 with the battle cry Summon an Abyss Watcher and the Death Rattle, which does the exact same thing. Now the summoned Abyss Watchers of course won't have these abilities, instead they're just 3/4s by themselves. I also thought of making their stats increased as well, and then include a summoned one for your opponent, similar to how one of the Abyss Watchers in Dark Souls 3 will actually fight amongst his brothers, which is honestly probably the one thing I'd add to this card looking back on it. Another cool idea, after all 3 of the Abyss Watchers are dead on the board, you could summon another one final stronger one similar to the actual fight in the game, but I'm not sure how balanced that would be in the end, but I'm sure you guys will let me know. Now, naturally, I tackled a lot of my favorite and most memorable bosses from the Dark Souls franchise first. Don't worry though, I have some normal enemies and even spells in this video as well. But let's be honest, the bosses are a ton more fun from a creative point of view. Artorias was number 1 in my original Dark Souls boss video, and still to this date is one of my favorite characters in the game. While making his card, I tackled a lot of things about him that could make him similar to his boss fight in the game, but the one thing that stood out to me was his partner, Great Wolf Sif. And of course I had to add Sif as a card as well. So Artorias just by himself is an overpriced awful stat card, a 7 mana 4/4, and is actually terrible, but when you combo him with Great Wolf Sif, which is a 4 mana 4/2 epic, all of a sudden, when they're finally reunited, they'll both become fucking amazing. Artorias' battle cry is if Great Wolf Sif is on the board, he gains a +4/+4, and of course, taunt so he can protect his doggo like he did against the Abyss. That's not all though. Great Wolf Sif also gains +2 health when Artorias is summoned, making him a 4/4 as well. So by themselves, they're not so great, but combined, all of a sudden they have potential to control the board for a while. Another aspect I thought of messing with is if Sif somehow dies before Artorias, even though he has taunt, maybe by a spell of some kind, then Artorias would enrage, becoming even worse. But I think a 7 mana 8/8 with taunt is pretty strong as is. Gravelord Nito is the Lord of Death and Decay and the First of the Dead, so while making this card I needed to make a new tribe for the game, which is the Undead. This tribe could be shared amongst a ton of other Hearthstone cards as is, and I've created a lot of undead minions that aren't actually going to be shown in this video, things like the Bone Wheels, the Skeleton Warriors, and the Giant Skeletons. So Nito would have to be placed in like an undead themed deck. He's an 8 mana 0/0, and his battle cry is gain +1/+1 for every undead minion that has died this game. So he has a ton of potential for the end game, summoning this giant fucking minion at the end, depending on how many undead both you and your opponent have lost in this game. But if that number is low, he could also become an absolute piece of trash. He feeds off the death of the match, much like his game counterpart, and was a really unique card to think up. Again, a big shout out to Dragonastra. He gave me this idea as well. Really solid ideas, mate. Honestly, one of my favorite cards that I've designed isn't actually a boss at all, but instead is one of the most memorable enemies from the franchise. This isn't a minion though, this is a devastating spell. This is the Mimic Chest. The Mimic Chest is a 6 mana cost spell that will add 3 replica cards to your opponent's deck, which look like they're normal cards, but when used, deal 5 damage to their hero. Think of it like the already existing Iron Juggernaut that shuffles the mine into your opponent's deck that will instantly deal 10 damage when pulled. But this Mimic is honestly a little more dangerous. Imagine pulling your game-winning card and you throw it onto the board spamming well played, and all of a sudden, the card turns on you midway and bites your hero, turning the tide of the battle. Your mana is spent, and you just got cucked out of lethal. This card might be a little overpowered when you think of it like that, but the downside is they might never pull the 3 Mimic cards, and they just beat you before it happens, or maybe they pull them, but never play that certain card. There's also the chance that they only put 1 minion in their deck, and they've already used it, so when they pull a duplicate minion, they already know it's fake. It really makes your opponent have to actually think about what they're doing and keep an eye on what they play, and what their deck consists of, but like I mentioned before, I really fucking love this card. You may not agree with me here, but the Bed of Chaos can honestly just go disappear forever. In Dark Souls is a giant mindfuck of a boss which doesn't have a high attack or a high health pool, but instead focuses on environmental damage. Once you're out of that sort of danger though, the Bed of Chaos is all of a sudden a stupid, useless bug. So with that in mind, I made him an 8 mana 1/1, but the true savior here is the board clear. His battle cry is deal 6 damage to all enemy minions on the board. Can you imagine having like a Bronzebeard on the board and triggering that twice? 12 damage to all enemy minions, basically destroys anything in the game. Kind of like a Holy Nova, except in a minion form and is a little stronger. Outside of that spell though, 1 hit from anything and the Bed of Chaos wilts away into nothing, just like in Dark Souls. I still hate that boss fight forever though. Remember that giant impenetrable tree boss from Dark Souls 3 with all the weird bull sacks covering its body, which were its only downfall? For some reason I decided to take this unfavorable boss fight and turn it into a pretty interesting combo of cards. This is one of the ones that I think might need a little tweaking here and there for the mana or an attack cost, but I think the general idea of it is really interesting and hasn't been done before. The Cursed Rotted Greatwood is an 8 mana 7 attack card which, like you can see, has no health attached. It's immune to all damage and spells. Now I know people are screaming at the screen overpowered right now, but the kicker with this card is when it's summoned, it brings along 2 Greatwood eggs. If these eggs are destroyed or silenced, the Cursed Rotted Greatwood is destroyed instantly and forever. These eggs are 0/3s and can be pretty easy to expose, but pretty easy to buff and heal as well if you want to keep your tree alive. In the end, it's like an 8 mana 7/6 if you add up the eggs, but it has a lot of potential to hide eggs behind taunts, and the tree can go ham on anything it wants whilst alive without taking any damage. I'm thinking maybe the eggs could be dropped to a 0/2, or the damage of the actual tree could be lowered to like 6 to balance it out, but outside of that, I think it really fits in with the actual boss fight and is an interesting concept at least. So we have 3 cards left for this video, stepping away from the legendary bosses for a while here. We're going to take a look at one of my most hated enemies from Dark Souls 3, the Rathorjalis. Their whole shtick is that gas that lowers your character's health to nothing, allowing them to destroy you in one hit. So I took this idea and made it a 5 mana 2/4 epic with the text, whilst on the board, all enemy minions' health are lowered to 1, which looks extremely powerful and probably is. I heard a few people mention maybe lower their health each turn, but it's way too easy to just destroy it before that happens. Keep in mind, if your opponent kills it, then all their minions return to full health. So if they can remove it quickly, then you just wasted 5 mana on basically nothing. On the opposite end, if you have a bunch of small minions on the board with 1 attack, all of a sudden you can clear the board a lot easier thanks to this card. This one probably needs the most work as far as balancing goes, but I think it's a perfect representation of the enemy from Dark Souls 3. Now, how could we make it through the first video without adding the man himself, Celaya of Astora, the most well-known NPC in the game. He's about cooperation and praising the sun. He gives you your white soapstone in the original Dark Souls and became an instant classic. He's a 5 mana 4/4 with the battlecry summon a white soapstone on the board, and a death rattle of restoring 8 health to your hero. This is the one part of the card that probably could be tweaked. But what does the white soapstone do, you ask? It's a 0/4 minion that cannot attack, but at the start of every one of your turns it will summon a friendly knight, much like the actual stone from the Souls franchise. The friendly knight is a gold phantom with a 2/2, and the text praise the sun naturally. I know a lot of these cards have backgrounds for certain classes in Hearthstone, like this looks like a paladin card, but I have no specific classes in mind for them. I just chose the background that I thought looked the best with the card. Once Celaya is summoned, prepare for him to start flooding your board with pawns, ready for jolly cooperation. And I mean pawns with the AW. Let's not do dark holes again. The last card I want to discuss in this video is probably the most controversial one I posted on Twitter. Yhorm the Giant is a Dark Souls 3 boss that can be easily disposed of if you pick up the Storm Ruler weapon in his boss arena. If you don't have it though, he's got a lot of health and attack and won't go down easy. I took that idea and made him an 8 mana 12/12 card with the text, give your opponent Storm Ruler, which is a 6 mana 8/1 weapon that can instantly kill Yhorm the Giant and will receive no damage in return. A lot of people mention that this card is useless because he'll just die the next turn because of Storm Ruler, but in certain situations, if he's hidden behind taunts or you can destroy their weapons somehow, all of a sudden you have an instant 12/12 on the board that can do a lot of damage to the opponent. The opponent might also choose to use the 8/1 weapon to attack, not Yhorm, but instead kill something else or maybe finish you off as well, because that is a pretty powerful weapon, my friends. I think it's possible maybe lower his cost to 7 mana as well, and I'm not really sure if your opponent instantly gets the weapon equipped or they have to do it himself. Both have their ups and downs. You guys can let me know which one is better down below. And that is it. Thanks again for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if it does well, I'll share more of the monstrosities I've created, and I look forward to hearing your guys' ideas down below. If you did enjoy the video and want to see more, let me know below or on Twitter or wherever you want. And a shout out to all my Patreon supporters allowing me to do what I do. And until next time, this is Epic Name Bro, signing off.